Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Michlin here along with Megan Cullip.
Good morning, everybody.
Good to have you here. We are back for our local coronavirus COVID-19 community information program here on KSJE.
Should I share what I learned yesterday?
What did you learn yesterday?
What I learned yesterday is the reason why 19 is hyphenated.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm like, is this the 19th strand of COVID? No, it's just the year that it hit us.
I believe that's correct.
That's it.
You've looked it up. You've checked that out,
I've fact-checked that.
Okay, because you didn't believe me, so you went ahead to check it.
That's right. Well, and also, I just, I forget that scientists are just like very matter of fact, right?
Right.
It's the coronavirus and it's 2019, COVID-19, right?
There you go.
Poets over here, we just get fancy and...
You kind of wonder. You look into it. You think it's something else.
Yeah,
some big conspiracy.
No,
maybe.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, Scott.
Good. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Okay.
Anyway, so the show's a little different today. We should mention that. We're not streaming live. We had some technical issues, but we are updating this and uploading it to Facebook and YouTube. Mm-hmm. And again, it'll be on the radio on our partner station, KNMI, at noon, and at KSJE at 5 p.m., 5:06 p.m. today. So none of that has changed, everybody, and we're glad you found us on Facebook and YouTube today. So welcome.
That's right. Welcome. And we have a great show today because we have a special guest. We're bringing on the experts.
Right.
And do we have her on the air right now?
We could bring her on the air right now if you're ready for our special guest. Yeah. Good morning. You're on KSJE. How are you? Hi there. Is this Jean?
You're breaking up a little bit, Jean.
She's driving.
How is that? Is that any better?
Through the tunnel.
That's a lot better.
Now we've got you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is Jean Manns, licensed marriage and family therapist of Manns and Stacy Coaching and Counseling, Scott. And the reason I asked Jean to come on was there are a lot of lists that we can find on the internet and various sources about what we can do to help protect and nourish our mental health during these strange times. But that gets a little old, right? Go outside, make sure that you get up, take a shower, and dress yourself, all of that. We can find that anywhere. But I was looking for sort of a more filled out, deeper conceptual understanding for us. And so, Jean, welcome.
Okay. Well, with that introduction...
Thanks for having me.
Wow.
I'm good at the intro, Scott.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you, Jean, for calling in and being a part of the show today. So yeah, let's get started.
Let's get started. Yeah, Jean, you were talking to me about the concepts of what happens to our brains and our bodies when we're under stress. So can you give us a rundown on that?
Sure. Well, let me first say that I am following a lot of the things on the list that are being put out, and they're really good things. But they're things that take energy, motivation to do. Getting up in the morning, getting dressed, eating well, socially engaging in some way. These things all take some energy. And the reality is we're kind of wired as human beings to conserve our energy. And if we don't have a good enough reason to do things, oftentimes we're not motivated to do them. So what I wanted to just share a little bit about is some of the why of why should we use our energy to do some of the stuff that people are saying we should do to stay sane and mentally well during this time. So that's what I hope to talk about a little bit today. And I think if you can humor me for a few minutes or maybe a minute or so just to give you a quick rundown on a little bit of the brain science driving our stress.
Sure. And Jean, not to interrupt you, but I think it's more of you humoring us today. So,
yeah, I know, right?
Please don't.
Jean talking about motivation. I'm like, man, I feel like a personal attack on my pound of Twizzlers.
No. So you go right ahead.
Go ahead, Jean.
Thank you.
All right. Cool. Well, we are more primitive mammal than we like to think we are, for sure. And,
Scott's aware of his primitive mammalian status.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you, times of stress like the ones we're in definitely make us operate from the more primitive places of our brain. So just real quick, if you can imagine your brain, you've got a brain stem, and then you've got this middle part of your brain we call the limbic brain, and in there are a couple structures that are super important. One of them is the hippocampus, and one is the amygdala. And these two structures work together to constantly be looking for threat and helping us activate to deal with threat, life or death sorts of things, at least that we perceive them to be. And so these structures of the brain really are the ones that are running the show right now for all of us. And then we've got the third part of the brain, which is our higher reasoning center. That's our cortex. You know, if you were to take the cap off the top of the head and look down on the brain, it's that kind of wavy outer covering that you'd see as our higher reasoning cortex. And that was the last part to develop in our evolution. So, you know, the brain stem and the midbrain, the amygdala, are really the ones that take over when we're highly stressed out. And these are the structures that kind of direct our thinking, feeling, and doing automatically. You know, it's not something that we're consciously doing. We call it the autonomic nervous system. And so because we're wired to survive primarily, these structures are going to go online and direct everything that we take in from the environment, how we assess the environment, what we do, really outside of our conscious control. And so these are good structures because in time of danger, I'm going to be, you know, running away from the tiger and not thinking, gee, you know, should I move my legs right now? And, you know, doing this big higher reasoning assessment, I'm just going to get out of Dodge. So these structures are super important and adaptive and helpful. We want them there. But in times of COVID-19, we are inundated with these inner structures, the amygdala and the middle brain in particular, constantly on fire, registering threat. I kind of think of that amygdala as our smoke detector, and it's set on really sensitive, and it's set that way so that we can survive. But when we are all constantly feeling threat and information's coming into the system that is alarming the amygdala, we are operating from really stressed states all the time.
Interesting.
So,
and so,
yeah.
Gina, not to interrupt you, but I am. So I would imagine, though, as our brains are doing all this stuff somewhat automatically, right, because we're in this stressful state, does that mean some of our higher level brain activity is taking kind of a back seat because we're just too busy dealing with all this other urgent needs, like running away from the tiger?
Exactly. You know, there's a word for it. Scientists call it cortical inhibition, which really is just what you said. It's that when the amygdala and the hippocampus and the brain stem is kind of taken over our control, the cortical areas where we can logically think, rationally think, make a plan, figure out what to do next, those parts of the brain are offline.
So I have a follow-up question here. So if many of us are sort of interpreting this moment differently, right? So some folks feel that stress, are very aware of that stress, and are sort of deeply concerned. And others of us might be on sort of the other end of the spectrum, and we might be doing the right things, but we're a little less concerned, a little more nonchalant about it. Is that stuff in our brain still happening, even if we are not aware of it, and if we are a little more calm and collected, or perceive ourselves to be as such? Yeah.
Well, I think we all deal with stress differently, and we're coming into this highly stressful time with different capacities, for sure. You know, based on the experiences we've had and how we typically are able to kind of stay regulated, we're bringing that all in. But I think one of the things you're talking about is that sometimes we can look at people and they can look chilled out, they can look calm, but their nervous system can actually be in a highly stressed state. And we call that highly stressed state where people start to shut down, freeze. I think we're all familiar with, you know, we got fight, flight, right? I can kind of activate, and I can go to the store and get all the things I need, and I can educate my family about what to do and so forth. But really, when there's nothing left to do, when we're kind of done all the planning and preparing, we're kind of just sitting without any place to put our energy to do anything. And so that's very often when the brain flips into the freeze response. And it is an incredibly stressful state. We've got lots of adrenaline and cortisol, a lot of inflammation markers in the blood that we can see. Heart rates may be up. But on the outside, people can look really chilled out, cool, collected. And so you don't really know that somebody is super stressed out.
What are some other ways, when we're talking about perceiving folks? I know that you had shared with me offline earlier in the week about, like, say, looking at your teenage son and thinking, man, this kid's gotten super lazy the past couple weeks during this time, but there might be other things going on. And so in this time, how are we to deal with our relationships and protect those as well?
Yeah, very good. Exactly. I think the first thing before we can do anything relational, make a move towards somebody else, figure out what to do here, is assessing the situation correctly. And so freeze is a really interesting gear in the nervous system. I kind of think of fight, flight, freeze as gears, and then we have a fourth gear, we call it the ventral vagus system. Essentially, this is kind of your calmer, relaxed, focused attention state, but your higher reasoning is online, and you have capacity to read people's facial expressions and kind of intuit situations. So, getting back to your question, I would say step one is making sure you're assessing the other person in the relationship correctly, because you can't make a good move relationally if you're not vibing where they're at. And so freeze is something in the psychology community we've learned a lot about in the last 10 years, and it's actually a lot of in counseling. We do a heck of a lot more than talking, and a lot of what we're doing is helping people come out of freeze. But things you might not know about what somebody looks like in freeze. I've got a diagram, but I'm not sure.
We have it right now.
We're showing it right now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. This is a continuum of freeze. So if you look on the upper right where, it says passing out, we probably all had experiences or heard stories at least of somebody getting bad news, right? And maybe they'll pass out. Or, you've got some bad news to deliver and you say to somebody, have a seat, sit down, right? Why do we do that? We do that because when somebody gets overwhelmed and starts going into freeze, they can have muscle weakness. They can, at extreme cases at the end of the gradient, even pass out, lose consciousness. But there's a lot of other small signs. You can be a little bit freezy or a lot freezy. And the little bit freezy, we tend to miss, and oftentimes misassess it as somebody that just isn't trying, or they're just being lazy, or they're being disrespectful because they're not listening to me. And we want to make sure we're not misassessing a situation where we've got somebody that's really in freeze, because you've got to deal with them differently. So, in looking at this continuum, a little bit freezy might be problems going to sleep. A lot of sleep issues fall under that. Accident prone and kind of spacey, people really are not paying attention. That's because, Scott, like you were saying, those higher reasoning centers go offline, and it's in the higher reasoning centers where you have focused attention, you can follow people's directions. If I say to my kid, go pick up your room, and it's a disaster, his cortex has to think, okay, what do I do first? Pick up my underwear. Then I need to, pick up the trash and then organize these books. But that's the higher reasoning centers. And so if those are offline, kind of hijacked by the stress response, somebody isn't going to be very successful in performing.
Interesting. And so the bottom one that I'm noticing on the chart here is talking about numbness, and I imagine maybe that's what a lot of folks maybe are feeling when they're exposed to all this news about what's going on is they maybe just get numb to the numbers or the things that they're hearing and maybe even want to turn off some of the news about what's going on in the world because they've just maybe gotten it doesn't register anymore. The numbers are just numbers. Is that kind of also what we're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. You kind of start feeling activated or afraid or that you want to get up and do something, and you just don't really feel. I think relationally that's a good one to talk about because I was working with a couple this week, and the woman was really anxious, and about a lot of things, not just this time, and felt like her husband didn't care at all. And he didn't care because, he wasn't getting upset with her. This is a big deal, and why are you just standing there? And, you're not even getting upset, And as I watched this, I could see he didn't appear upset, kind of flat-faced. And she was assessing this as he just didn't care. And when she assesses it that way, you can imagine if you think your partner doesn't care, you're going to up the ante, you're going to go in for the attack, you're going to collapse and cry, right? But what I was seeing is he was in this freeziness, and that it wasn't that he didn't care, it was that he just couldn't respond because he was stuck in this gear.
Interesting. And so is there any advice for something that we can do if we have someone in our life that is feeling this way or appearing this way to try, or even with children, to kind of bring them out and to ask if they're being overwhelmed with all the stuff they're hearing and seeing and exposed to on a minute-by-minute basis these days?
Yeah, definitely. There's stuff we can do that's helpful and unhelpful. And, just as a concept here, before I say a few things about that, think of freeze as the buffering state on your computer. So can you picture that you're, trying to download a YouTube video, or you're, waiting for Zoom, and you have that little dial and it goes round and round and round on your computer?
Yeah.
Oh, today more than others.
I was going to say, one might say in our studio this morning.
Right now.
Go on.
Exactly. Yes, indeed.
Yes.
It's like you're in my head.
It's like, get out of our heads, licensed marriage and family therapist. You.
Right.
Go on.
Yeah. So freeze is that buffering state. The body can only handle so much to download at once. If you think about it, we have thousands of bits of information coming into our system at any one time. What I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, how my socks feel on my ankles, whether I'm hungry. So the body is always dealing with a ton of information to process. So in these times, we're adding on even more data coming into the system. And so what happens is freeze is our buffering, right? It's taking a while to process. It's too much coming into the system. So freeze is adaptive. It's healthy. Fight and flight, healthy, adaptive. We want these states. The problem can be is that we can get stuck in any of these states, and we can get stuck in freeze. And that can become the problem. But going into freeze for some time is what we're supposed to do when life gets overwhelming. But, getting back to your question, Scott, about, what can we do if we ourselves are feeling freezy or we assess our loved ones to be freezy? I'd say first thing is recognize you don't want to tax that bandwidth anymore. You don't want to be throwing a heck of a lot more data into that stream, because the buffering will never catch up. And that's where we get stuck in freeze. That's where we start having mental health symptoms, long-term depression, panic disorder, anxieties. People get stuck in the buffering. So as a loved one, like when I see my kid like that, I may not know exactly what to do, but I do know that throwing, 3 or 4 commands at him, having an angry look on my face, And using a tone of voice of disgust is going to throw a heck of a lot more data down that bandwidth that he can't process.
Got it. And you had, I'm sorry, Jean, go on.
No, go ahead.
You had mentioned to me at some point about leading with relief when you are in a disagreement with a loved one. Oftentimes what we want to do is continue to maybe be the lawyer and further our case, or be the state debate champ, one might say. That's one of us in this room, Scott.
Yeah, I wonder who that could be.
I wonder. So anyway, but you had talked about...
Jean?
No.
Yeah.
That's right. You had talked about leading with relief. So can you just give us a little bit on that before we have to, wrap up here?
Sure. So leading with relief can really help calm somebody's amygdala that's on fire and not put more down that bandwidth channel. So good example actually happened last night in my family. My 18-year-old is on San Juan County Fire. And a call came in, and we're trying to socially distance, and he's the only one really leaving the house interacting with people. And what I've asked of him, because I kind of go through the roof at this time of are you going to be okay and who you can be interacting with, is I ask him to lead with relief. So it looks like this. Mom, call came in. I really need to go, but I'm going to reassure you. I'm going to follow all the protocols they put in place to keep us safe. I'm going to wash my hands. When I come back into the house, I'll take my clothes off and wash them. Like, I care about you guys. I'm not going to put you in danger. So that's leading with relief, because he makes a move out of the starting gate with me that calms me down. He's not scaring my amygdala more. He's actually throwing some cold water on it.
Got it. Well, that's great. And this has been super helpful, so we appreciate
Very much so.
I know, right? I feel like we just got a free seminar.
I think we did. I think she's going to send you a bill.
Yeah, no invoices, Jean.
Jean, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And on behalf of our audience, thank you for sharing all this great information about what we're feeling, and maybe not able to identify what we were feeling, but now we do.
But now we do, yeah.
So
I'm putting the
thank you.
freeze continuum up in our office.
I think you should.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Well, you're welcome. Nice to spend a few minutes with you guys this morning.
Thank you very much. You too. Thank you, Jean.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care. Very good. Well, there you go.
Man.
There's some good information
I know,
for
right?
everyone today on our kind of a little different show that we're doing because we don't have our live presence, but we're going to get back to that. So tomorrow,
we will.
Things should be back to normal. We're
yes.
hoping.
Right, I was going to say,
Hello?
we're open. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Too much buffering. Yeah.
Exactly. But before we go, again, I always like to check the numbers.
Check the numbers.
And it's not just to overwhelm everybody.
No, they just keep rising, though.
But I think,
we go.
Well, and so I look for, and the reason I like to share these numbers, everyone, from our website, again, it's ksje.com, and we're compiling all the numbers of the cases, of course, because we look forward to that day when they stop going up.
Right.
Really, that is my hope,
Yes,
and that's
once
why
we
we
see
do
that
this.
thing flatten. Yeah.
But here we are. We're at 315. San Juan County cases now 32. There's been now 5 deaths in New Mexico and 26 recoveries. And so we always share this information from the State Health Department, and that's where this is coming from, everybody. And it's right there at ksje.com. The county totals are there. As you can see, McKinley County now has 16. Directly to our south, Rio Arriba is 4. Bernalillo, of course, still leading the state with 129, and San Juan at 32. So that's where that is. And the other stories that have come in would be, of course, the curfew on the Navajo Nation. The Navajo Nation now is 174 and 7 deaths. And again, same reason to share these numbers is because we hope that they start to stop getting new cases and go down.
Right.
And La Plata County, by the way, did not get any new cases reported yesterday.
That's good. I mean, I think also if you scroll back up to the top with the numbers, the number that's been static this whole time is recoveries.
Right.
And then the deaths increase very slowly. I mean, it's only 1 death increase since yesterday, but it's that total number of New Mexico cases that is worrisome.
Correct.
Yeah, it just keeps.
Which is why,
rising.
Again, a lot of folks are saying stay home.
Right.
Only go out if you need to. If you do have to go out, don't take your family with you. Maybe just to send one person out to the store. You don't have to take kids.
Send the hardiest person.
Exactly. And so that's kind of the message. And we're seeing some public service campaigns from the county and the cities about staying home and just abiding by all those state and federal directives.
Right. I do want a semantics lesson. Are you ready for this?
All right.
Are you willing to let me go?
I'm cautiously optimistic.
Okay, good.
All right.
That's how I feel in general around this time, cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
But sheltering in place.
My hand's on the button.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm waiting if I have to do anything.
Yeah, no, sheltering in place. I just feel like that's a misnomer during this time, because generally when we say shelter in place, we mean something terrible like active shooter or tornado.
Right, we usually have in a school situation.
Yeah,
so the doors are locked
or even like I said, natural disaster situation, and there's a definitive ending to that. It's a short-term thing with a clear ending.
Right.
So
we don't have that.
We don't have that. So I've just been like a little flummoxed with the terminology.
So stay home is maybe a better label.
Because also, getting outside in your backyard is totally kosher and actually good for you.
Right.
So anyway.
And as I've mentioned since we started this show, we're all going to have amazing yards this spring and summer.
You might.
Because we're spending so much time in our yards.
Yeah.
Oh, not you? Okay.
Well, I'm not known for that.
All right.
So is it good news time, or what
I
do you
think it is. I think we
Okay.
should share some good news before we get out of here today.
Cool.
But yeah.
Local good news.
Yes.
So a local printing company in town that makes various merchandise for whatever.
And we should shout out to the Daily Times because that's your source for this.
The
good
Daily
news.
Times is the source for the good news, and
they deserve our support, by the way. The journalists are doing a lot of work, extra work during this time.
Yes,
so
and they're slim
shout out to them.
pickings, There's only a handful of them.
There are.
On the beat down there. So anyway, Daily Times, shout out to Daily Times. There's a local printing small business, who has, obviously the orders for the regular stuff they print are way down, and they discovered that, hey, we have all of the automated equipment that is needed to manufacture these masks. And so normally, Daily Times had mentioned that normally prototypes for new products take forever, right? And then you have to test them and et cetera, et cetera. Well, these guys threw a prototype together by March 25th, took it over to San Juan Regional. The physicians over there made some comments on it. They took that back, and they made the necessary edits, and now they are just churning them out. So
awesome.
I know. I love it.
That's great.
Yeah, some ingenuity out there.
Indeed, and I was looking for the name of the business so we could shout them out. Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether
I think we should be able to name a name.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we're just giving them it's good news and it's positive, and we should share that.
Yes. So thank you, Just Click It Printing.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us again on our local information program. Again, we apologize for the lack of live streaming today, but we're going to work on that and get that fixed tomorrow. And tomorrow's show, by the way, we've got a lot of medical professionals lined up to speak with us to answer some of our questions and hopefully some of your questions, too.
Right, call in. That's the perfect time to call in.
Exactly.
Again, free advice all over the place this week.
There you go, and that's the whole point of this show. So thank you again for joining us, everybody. Stay safe and stay well, and most importantly, stay home.